Right. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the virtual DB2 user group. And I'm Trevor Eddles. I'm CEO of a company called iTechEd Limited. We're a mainframe consultancy, analysis, and technical authoring organization. We're responsible for the content on the virtual DB2 website, and we produce the newsletters. We also look after the virtual IMS and virtual CICS user groups as well. Right, let me just let a few more people in. Right, I want to start then by looking at the agenda. So introduction, we've got a wonderful presentation coming today from Chad Reiber. He's principal software consultant at BMC Software, and he's going to be discussing DB2 ZOS recovery, how best practices have changed to address new threats. And a copy of his slides will be available on our website probably later today, definitely by tomorrow morning. Then, if you've got any questions for him, then we'll look at the latest DB2 news, some recent DB2 related articles and blogs, and then we'll talk about what's coming soon. So that's basically the plan for today. I'm expecting it'll last just under an hour for the whole session. So let me just let a few more people into our meeting. Right, so as I just said, today's presentation is from Chad Reiber. In 1983, Chad started in IT with AT&T as a developer of data generator software. From there, he moved into the database arena as a database administrator for IMS, IDMS, and DB2. Chad has been working with DB2 since 1987. Hired by BMC Software in 1997 as a software consultant, Chad primarily supports all aspects of BMC's mainframe products for the Northeast DB2 community. Before I hand over to him, can I just say that if anyone's got any questions for him as we go along, can you type them into the chat, please? And I'll ask him as we get there. Okay, so let me stop sharing my screen and I'll ask Chad to share his. And I'll hand over to you, Chad.
Okay, sharing my screen.
Yep.
All right, hopefully everyone sees my screen here. So welcome everyone, and thanks for this opportunity to talk to everyone. Today we are going to talk about DB2 recovery and how best practices might have changed as we've developed DB2 and how we worked with DB2. So I'll ask a question right from the start, and you don't have to answer it in the chat. Just save those for questions. But do you remember the last time you had to do a recovery? And then I follow up usually, do you really want to remember the last time you did a recovery? You know, DB2 recovery could be harmless, right? You know, a table here, a table there, maybe not even in production, you just recover to an image copy. But DB2 recovery can be challenging. You know, what if we found that image copy we wanted to recover to wasn't there anymore? For one reason or another, it got, you know, rolled off a GDG or something like that, and where we needed to recover to wasn't available. So we need to be ready for that. DB2 recovery can cost money, right? Availability to production data and all that goes along with that. But I will tell you, it happens. Recovery happens out there, and it happens more than when we have to declare a disaster. So your company spend a lot of money for disaster recovery, you know, multiple sites, you know, mirrored DASD. But when was the last time you had to declare a disaster? Mostly, when you're in a recovery situation, you're using all the tools that you have available, starting with your head and your expertise to recover this guy. So what this presentation is talking about is how we have to address the different threats are out there, and taking a step back, how we need to look at recovery. If we think of recovery 10, 15 years ago, maybe it wasn't top of the list, right? Yeah, we knew how to do recovery. Someone would ask us about it. It was more like insurance policy that either we had a third-party vendor recovery tool, or that we had some recovery JCL out there to recover to. But now with the changing, we need to really think about recovery and not have to worry about it, as my phone rings when you know it. So while I go over this presentation, think about your organization and think about how prepared and how ready you are for the next recovery. Hopefully you will never have to do a recovery, but if you have to, are you ready? So here's the agenda. Do we really need to do recoveries anymore? I would go to sites and they would say, hey, we don't do recoveries. We can take down the system. There's high availability. If we need to recover, we're going to write some fix-it program and along we go. Well, I'll tell you, just a month ago, I was at a customer where those fix-it programs have gone out of control. And they're doing them not only once a week or once a month, they're doing them daily. And what happens is what happens if that where predicate is not the right where predicate, and you actually corrupt some of the data you didn't want to fix? And that's actually what happened to them. And it turned out their image copies were every Sunday. No image copies during the week, and this fix-it program happened during the week. Okay, well, the plan might have been for a recovery, we'll always just go back to Sunday's copy. Forget about the log, we got it covered, right? Well, times have changed. Availability changed for this application. So now they had to recover and roll forward the log. And of course, everyone in management's asking, how much longer, how much longer, how much longer, right? You got to be prepared. You got to be ready and prepared. And some people go, Chad, that's the same thing. Readiness and preparation, isn't that the same thing? Well, I'm going to show you that I don't think it's the same thing. I think you need to be ready to recover, and I think you need to prepare to recover. And we'll go through those things. So why do we worry about recovery? Well, could be some regulations out there, in the United States, banking or make sure that our banks are recoverable for one reason or another. In the States, I'm sure you saw that, we had some banks fail, right? So banking is very important to all economics. So there might be some regulation that you have to be recoverable. Customer satisfaction, right? Customer success, right? That's a buzzword these days. We have to think about our customers. But again, if we are in a recovery situation, that's an unplanned outage, and the customers can't get to the data. Just this year, the FAA had a problem with one of their databases where the database was corrupted during maintenance. So it wasn't a hardware problem, it wasn't anything like that, but during maintenance, the database was corrupted. They couldn't recover, so they said, oh, let's go to our backup system. And guess what? What they corrupted on the local system was also corrupted on the back end system. So we had a ground stop in the United States for the morning of, I think it was January 13th, or maybe the 23rd, whatever it was. Customer satisfaction, the FAA, the airlines, people wanting refunds, and then people missing their flights. Revenue, it's going to cost us money, right? If we're out of the water for a period of time, are we going to lose revenue? Is someone not going to buy that piece of hardware that they needed, right? They were ready to buy it then and not buying it again. And then the business itself, right? This is when your boss calls you in and says, hey, are we recoverable? Can we get back to a certain point in time because I have a group of auditors asking me about this? So it could be self-imposed, it could be segment imposed, it could be government imposed, right? For everyone in EMEA and APAC, right? There's a lot of government imposed recovery requirements. And there's certain expectations exist. That expectation is you who are in charge of recovery have all the answers. How long it would take to bring back the customer database? How long would it take to bring back the whole DB2 subsystem? You guys are in charge of that. So this question comes up, and it was on my my slide, my agenda slide. Do we even do recoveries anymore? Recover is a real challenge, and I'll tell you, I started with these are best practices and we have more threats, but recover is a real challenge, whether you don't have other threats out there, right? Data volumes are exploding. You have more DB2 objects that you have to worry about. There's interconnectivity of those DB2 objects. Your staff and expertise pressures, right? In the past, recovery was a part-time job. How many hours went into DR preparation and testing? But it'd be one group of people or one set of people. Maybe they were overseas, or maybe they were in the States, and you and me people were relying on them, right? What if they aren't there anymore, right? So we got more data, we got more apps. Do we have more DBAs? And typically we don't have more DBAs these days, right? We're working with what we have going forward. Planned downtime pressures, right? We can't have any brief outages. They must be eliminated. Consistent cross DBMS backups. Oh, God bless you out there. And like I said, it's never a good time for an unplanned outage. So I'm gonna give you a story here. This is one of my, I wouldn't say favorite recovery stories, because when we were in it, it was very scary, and very scary for the customer as well. So I came to BMC, as Trevor said, I came to BMC in the late 90s. So, before that, I was a DBA like you guys, or a system programmer like you guys. And, I'd get waken up in the middle of the night for one reason or another, right? That was part of the job. So BMC, I don't get waken up that much in the middle of the night anymore. I do say it's nice, but in this recovery story, my phone, so I have a home office, my phone was ringing at 4 a.m. Must just be a wrong number. I go back to sleep. Well, then it rings again. I'm like, okay, this is something going on, right? So second time I go and I answer it. It was a customer. They have data integrity issues, and they're calling everyone. They're calling all their vendors, IBM, BMC, Broadcom, you name it, they're calling them all, right? We got to get on a conference call, need you to get support, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, they were migrating DASD from one vendor to another. And again, availability is key. They were trying to do this and keeping the system up at the same time. Well, something went wrong. It went bumped in the night, right? And then they figured out that this was happening like 15 minutes into this conversion. And what was happening was the memory and cache of these DASD devices were losing data. So not only DB2 updates, but flat file updates. The log was on those volumes, so we're losing log records. Not all of them, some, not all of them, okay? So immediately we at BMC said, well, you should bring down the system and declare a disaster and get this system back up to prior to the problem with the DASD. Well, they didn't. They kept the system up. It's actually, they didn't call us until 2 hours after the situation, and the system was up and running. They were taking updates, they were updating this database, they were making business decision on this data which was incomplete. So not declaring a disaster, what they did was they did the best they can with recovery. So they did have a DR system, so they didn't go to a disaster. They didn't do a local recovery of the subsystem prior to the problem. But we did use some of their backups that they had on the DR system, brought them back locally, and then we actually flew a BMC developer up to this customer, and for 3 weeks, we recovered over 3 million records that were half baked in a log that we had available, and we were getting down to running one job to recover one record. So that was probably the worst recovery I was part of. But I will tell you, recoveries happen out there. If you think it's not going to happen to you, they do. I get called into a recovery probably about a half a dozen times a year. And when I get called in, you know they need help, right? They've tried to do it themselves and they couldn't be able to do it. So I bring up this story because in this story, there are villains and there's heroes. So who are some of our villains out there that we need to maintain and worry about when it comes to recovery? So a long time ago, so I actually go back to 1.3 of DB2. There's probably people out there that go even further back. But we had to worry about recovery because DB2 itself, it was new, it was a new DBMS, sometimes things messed up. And if you were like my company, we actually tried to do, unnatural things with DB2, right? And that caused itself a problem. ZOS hardware issues. So if we go back 30, 40 years, yeah, there was a lot more hardware issues. We don't have hardware issues nearly as much as we had in the past, but I can tell you, if you have an issue with a controller, there's a lot more data behind that controller that's going to be affected. And then self-inflicted. This is still happening today, right? Application issues. I brought up, a fix-it program and not vending out that fix-it program and causing more problems. Hardware additions or maintenance, like my story. And then it still happens. Oops, that was production. I could tell you, this year, at least 2 customers have reached out to me and said, hey, we inadvertently dropped something in production. We're trying to use this tool to get it back. Can you help us? And then there's some things we can't control, right? There's, application issues. We can have someone double check my SQL on this update of that fix-it program, but there are things that are out of our control, Mother Nature. Hurricanes, floods, power outages, fires on the West Coast, a lot of fires this past year in the United States. Hurricanes, I put 2 hurricanes here because these are the ones I lived through and ones that I have stories on. Irene was hit the East Coast, a lot of rain, and they were predicting a lot of flooding on the coast. So I had a customer that declared a disaster, went to their DR site and was running there. And you know what? Irene wasn't so bad. So now they wanted to move back to their local data center. Well, they tested the one way. They never tested how to get back. So we had to utilize some of our log tools to help them get back to their local site for DB2. Sandy was a lot of wind, a lot of rain. I was out of power for almost 3 weeks. I had a situation where, in New York City, there was a lot of flooding. So people declared a disaster and went to their DR site. And one company, it was, everything worked fine, everything was great. But after a couple of weeks in their DR site, they never had a plan to recover their development and QA environment. So production's up and running fine, but where did the developers develop? Where do the QA people test the fixes and the new code? So they had to actually build a whole new development environment as they were running on their hot site. And this is the most recent villain lurking in the shadows, the cyber attack, ransomware. Right now, ransomware accounts for about 25% of security attacks. That was last year. I think IBM had something out this year that says it's a little less than that, maybe, still over 20%, but maybe 23, 24%. Okay. But if we go back to 2018 and 19, it was about 10%. So it's something that we have to be aware of, right? The average cost of a data breach is the highest it's ever been, right? Everyone's out there having to mention it, reach out to customers that have been affected by that. And I'm going to say this, every mainframe is under attack. So if you go to a presentation from a security vendor, whether it's IBM, BMC, or anyone else, they are going to say the mainframe is under attack, just like any other platform is under attack. What makes me worry about this is the power of the mainframe makes things worse. So I have a figure here. So this was done by Splunk. Splunk actually did a test, and they did about 100,000 files, 50 gigabytes. They were able to encrypt this in about 4 minutes. And that's off the mainframe. Could you imagine how much, if it was on the mainframe, how much data can be encrypted in 4 minutes? So I say this, don't build a fence. You really need to protect against the infections, and you want to discover that early as possible. I know everyone that's on this call, all 66 of you, well, minus me, are doing a great job with RACF or ACF2 and making sure that the platform is secure, and not everyone has access to stuff that they don't want to have access to. But if someone gets in there, if someone hacks into there, yeah, they're going past the RACF worry. So yeah, you have to be aware of when they are in there and what they're doing, and discover that early. What happened? Okay, here we go. So what that might look like, right? Here's a component of an attack. So you guys take backups out there, and I say guys, I mean that as a generic term. You guys and ladies are out there taking backups, and that's what you need to do, right? You need to prepare and take backups out there. But once that attack happens, it's key to understand when it happens. Because if you don't detect that attack right away, once you do detect that attack, you have to discover what has been affected, discover when you are affected, and then are we recoverable, right? Because it depends on what the attack hit, right? Did it hit the backups? Did it hit the logs? That type of thing. Because depending on that, makes you zig or zag on how you do the recovery, right? So if I look at some tools out there in the marketplace, and obviously I'm aware of the BMC AMI security tool, when that attack happens, okay, with AMI security, we're keeping an eye on file integrity. So meaning if Chad's out there and he's updating a file that he has no need to update, or has never updated this file before, that should set off an alert that Chad Reiber is doing something bad. Either he's disgruntled, or someone's hacked in and got into his ID and are messing with our files or anything like that. So as soon as we see that, we can certainly shut down Chad's ID and shut down the jobs that he submitted and limit the attack, right? So I'm detecting it as close to the attack as possible, right? And when I know that Chad started to do this at 11:56 on the East Coast, that might be the point that I need to recover this too. So finding that recovery point and going ahead and doing it and doing the recovery. So I'm going to take a breath here. Does anybody have any questions? Put them in the chat. Trevor, we doing good?
Yeah, there's no questions yet, but we'll see whether we get some now.
Okay, hopefully I'm doing a good job in answering them before they come up. So with any story, there needs to be heroes, and this is the real guts of this presentation, everyone, okay? We need to be ready for any type of recovery. Are we prepared for it? Is there enough time? So this goes back to, and I'm sure your companies have said, hey, we need to be able to recover this in 2 hours. I worked with a bank in the central states where they said they need to be able to recover everything to 2 hours. So anytime we had a recovery, it had to get back in 2 hours. That's our bogey, right? That's what we want to work towards. And do we have enough data and recovery resources to make that 2 hour window? So we need to prepare for the worst. This is the recovery ready part, right? We need to prepare for the worst. We really need to fight the villains, right? So we need to check our resources, okay? Check our equipment, and then on the right-hand side is those questions that I think we need to answer daily. I don't think we should wait for, every month or every week. It's almost a daily process. Now, of course, automation would help in that, and we'll talk about that as well. But does our backup strategy meet our needs, right? How much log do we have to apply in between our image copies, right? So if I go back to my example early, they took a backup on Sunday. Wednesday, they needed to do recovery. Guess what? We have to spin through all those logs. Hopefully we still have them, and hopefully they're still on DASD, right? Do we have enough log to recover locally, all right, from our last image copy? So I have an example, year-end processing insurance company put in some changes to their programs for year-end processing. Year-end processing ran fine, we're good, but about a week and a half later, they said, oops, we messed up. We updated the database incorrectly. Guess what? The image copies were gone. They could not use the image copies. Luckily, they had their logs for 2 weeks. So we were able to use their log data to actually undo those transactions, fix the program, and rerun it. What happens if you have if the plan A fails? You have a plan B. And then this one, I was talking with someone last week. They want me to come in and do some work, and they brought this up, and it's something that people forget about. Which application object should be recovered first, right? We need to get this system up as fast as possible, right? But maybe, do we need the archive and history tables right away? Should we get the more of the operational data store up first, right? So maybe we have different tiers of applications that we have to recover, right? So a tool would be helpful in building that for us. Yeah, wow, how backups have changed, right? When we think about the bad guys out there, in day one, we took backups just for recovery, right? If we didn't need to worry about recovery, we save a lot of CPU on our backups. And then someone said, hey, we got these backups. Why don't we unload the data that's on those backups? And then more recently, using these backups for data migration instead of unloading and loading, actually using the image copies to do a page at a level data migration. But today, there's that new target out there of ransomware, where both our data and our backups are exposed. So what do I mean by that, right? If we had an application problem that messed up our live database, well, we had the backup, right? And the backup was solid. It was that backup and everything was consistent at that point. Now, ransomware might go after that backup, right? So we need to protect our backups. We need to have cyber resilient backups, right? So there are many solutions for many different hardware and software vendors, right? You hear the term safeguarded copy, air gap copy, immutable copies, right? So yeah, we need to take a walk into that park and think about having copy separations. We also have to worry about getting those copies back, right? So another additional readiness that we have to be prepared for. But we still have the same issues: data loss, latency. Do we have enough logs to meet those backups? So I say, let's make sure our backups are ready for any type of recovery. So verify that our objects are recoverable. This is something we need to do day to day, week to week, because we don't want to be in a recovery situation and found out we never backed up this new object that we just added, right? You can manually build queries to check this, right? Minimum number of image copies need to exist, maximum number of days since the last image copy, maximum number of logs since the last image copy, right? We can write queries against syscopy to do that. A lot of times there's third-party software that provides a verification capability where, as you're running these backups, you can verify that those things are within your limits and either automate a warning to you, right? Automation, or actually just take an image copy if you don't have enough copies that are out there. And verify is a BMC term. I'm sure the Broadcom and IBM has something very similar. I'm not sure. And then on the last one here, of course, are we taking a frequent enough log processing? We can do some testing to see how much log we're processing between image copies. There's also a number of reports that BMC has out of their log tool that can show that. The last one I put here is incremental copies. And, I don't want to get into a battle between somebody that's out there. Do we take incrementals or do we not take incrementals? I'm a proponent of incrementals, and I know I'm probably not in the majority there, but if I can take more incrementals during the day, that potentially can limit the amount of log that I have to process. When you're looking at, hundreds of objects to do a recovery, it might be worth it. Speaking of our logging environment, okay, might be system programmers on here, might be DBAs on here, might just be application people on here. System programmers and DBAs really need to work together on their logging environment. The more active pairs you have, the better off you're going to be, right? Since version 10, we can add active logs on the fly, right? So if stuff is not resonant on DASD, well, let's add some more logs out there. In version 13, we can actually delete logs from Db2 if we need to. I say here, and I don't think I'm out of line here, that if you write your archives to DASD and allow HSM to migrate that, we're utilizing automation, right, to do that. So what that allows us to do, if we do need an archive for a recovery, it's actually going to bring it back on DASD. And what that does is, one, it speeds it up, right? And number two, it allows multiple recovery jobs to access that archive, right? Because we might want to submit multiple jobs to do that recovery. So recovery readiness, how long do we need to keep these logs around? Thank goodness for that insurance company keeping them around longer than the image copies, because it saved their bacon, right? But, how often does that happen? There are a number of reasons to address logging in your system. It could be availability, it could be resiliency, but I think, because I'm speaking and this is a recovery situation, a recovery presentation, the number one priority to build your logging environment is for recovery. So what do we do? What do we do, Chad? I hear a lot of words, a lot of stuff. What do we do? I think we should build a daily recovery health check, and not only support the recovery scenario that's the easiest to copy or something like that, but to handle all the recovery scenarios that I might need to do. And that could be local or remote, building JCL to recover these remote image copies that we have out there. I say this subsystem or application level recovery. I have a number of cases, and one of them I hid on the slide. So when you get the slides, where we were in a recovery situation for 5 days with a customer, and even past that, they had problems with their databases and some corruption out there. When if they just in the beginning said, let's just bring the whole subsystem, a local subsystem recovery, to the point that we had this problem, it would have saved a lot of manpower, a lot of lost records, and a lot of headache. Okay, so we need to validate our application recoveries, and that's many types, right? 2-copy, timestamp, quiesce, log point, and timestamp might be the most important if you think about ransomware. If we know that Reiber's ID was hacked at 11:33, let's recover to a timestamp prior to 11:33, right? And there's a number of products on the market that can build recovery health checks. Mine's Recover Manager over here, but there's probably more than these. So if you're using any of these tools, look at it and see if you can build an automated recovery. This is what we have in the BMC land. We can check for unrecoverable events. We can verify that archive logs are available for recovery. If your image copies are taken within 3 hours, right? So I do have customers that say, we're going to take copies every 3 hours because we want to minimize the log that we would have to deal with, right? So you can read this just as well as I can. And then I could say what my recovery point is, right? And here's, I'm going to go back to May 11th, 2022. That's not going to work, but you get the idea. And then you want to automate this. You don't want to wake up every morning and look at the output of these jobs. No, right? You don't want to do that. So within our tool, our recovery manager tool, we'll actually send you an email if any of the problems cropped up. So here I have some unrecoverable events. I have some archive logs that are required, but oh no, my archive logs are there, but I'm missing some copies. That's not good. So you can get that email. So, you can send it out to the group and someone can look at that, and maybe you need to make some changes out there. We also have a dashboard, so a recovery dashboard that will highlight unrecoverable events, what objects might have changed, that type of thing. So either one, you wake up and you go onto your dashboard, or you check your email to see if anything happened. So what equipment do we have to fight the villains here? We need to be prepared, and we need to know our tools just in case we get called in to do a recovery. So obviously the recover and rebuild, obviously copy, check. Well, why would we need check? Well, might want to check the index, make sure that it's appropriate and everything's connected. We'll talk about the log tool, unload and load. I've had cases where we've done a recovery and we didn't trust the recovery. So we actually unloaded the data from a backup, ran a load resume yes to see if any records were added on top of the recovered object. So everything's at your disposal here to do a recovery. And the standalone utilities, I don't think I use them myself a lot, but I have seen where when we get support and development involved, they might ask, hey, can you run a log P on this page of the log, or a DS1 print, because I want to see specifically what this record looks like, page headers or something like that. All right, that was ready. We are ready. Now we're being prepared, right? We know all our equipment. We're good on all our equipment, right? So now let's prepare for our different recovery scenarios here. Okay. Application SLA, right? So are our recoveries fast enough? Okay. How do we make them meet the needs of the business, right? And this is where I say, hey, what gets recovered first, right? So let's put some tiers on what we want to recover first and then address it, right? DB2 databases, they're logically and physically connected, right? Whether we use DB2 RI or we use application RI, if I'm on call and I'm recovering an application I'm not familiar with, do I know what those application RIs are or that DB2 RI is, right? So again, we need to set those groups. We need to set those object sets so we know what we're recovering and we're recovering everything that we need to do. And then JCL, do we have it? We don't want to be going to the module, right? You don't want your boss to say, okay, we need to recover these 10 objects. We recover to this log point. Oh, and if something hasn't changed, limit the recoveries. Oh, I want you to rebuild the index or recover the indexes, whichever you can do. And how long is that going to take? You don't want to tell your boss, well, I got to go look at the manual and see how to code that up, right? I mean, you don't want to have to tell them that you don't know how to do that recovery. So there's a lot of different decisions that you have to make to determine what objects need to be recovered by plan, by volume, by database, what objects are included in the above, where do you want to recover to, an image copy, a timestamp, and then building the actual JCL. One recovery job or multiple recovery jobs, okay? If it's multiple recovery jobs and the logs are being used, are those archives on tape or can we bring them down to DASD? Do we want to recover the indexes? Do we want to rebuild the indexes? Hey, is recover back out an option? Wouldn't that be great, right? And then do all these spaces need to be recovered? And then we run the jobs and we sit and we wait. So there are tools that actually do this all for you, right? If you don't have a tool, this is on you. So, some upfront preparation of building, say, CAN JCL for this database and all the RI that might go outside of that database is something you might want to do. So here's a situation. It's all about stories here today, people. Recovery was required, submitted multiple recovery jobs, one object per job. They were all waiting on the same tapes for the archives and the image copy. Took them 3 days to recover. Estimated cost of downtime was 10 million, okay? They needed a tool to automate building this JCL that could say, hey, wait a second here, you're all on the same tape. It's going to slow you down. Let me separate these guys onto the separate tapes to do the recovery. Hey, the DB2 log is your friend, right? And there are a lot of log tools out there. I say log percent sign, right? Log master, log analyzer, those type of tools. Everyone should be able to build and run the log tool. It is very easy to simulate, right? You can run the log tool on test. Yes, it's taking CPU, but the logs are already cut and living out there. You're not going to affect anything that's running currently, right? It is a way to do transaction level recovery. So if I go back to my fix-it program, they did a recover and a roll forward. What if they just said to the log, hey, undo what this user did? They did it incorrectly. Just undo it. Build the undo of the records that were actually implemented, right? So that's what the log tool gives you to be able to do recovery. But there are a lot of cases where you might have an image copy that's good. We've lost some log records, but being able to look at the log itself, a log tool will help you out with that. So the log tool is just another hero in this story, okay? Another story. DBA accidentally dropped production database. That never happens, right? But it's customer loyalty information, right? So if you're a hotel or a Starbucks or whatever you are, right? The app is unavailable. It's offline because we dropped some databases and some tables out there. You can't look at your balances. You can't claim your benefits. That could be a problem. Okay. After working with us for 28 hours, all the data was recovered, right? We used the log tool and the drop recovery tool within the log tool to bring that object back. There's other facilities out there in our recovery tools within our equipment. I point out some here, a redirected recovery. IBM put that in their recovery, I want to say kind of recently. BMC has always had an independent outspace. Being able to recover an object to a separate VSAM linear data set. So think about that. The object is up and running, but I can recover to a point in time to another VSAM data set and then maybe unload that data set, or maybe that data set is a separate table I created within the catalog, and now I can do queries against that recovered object. So that gives you a lot more tools, a lot more opportunities within a recovery situation. Looking at my time here, want to finish up and give Trevor some time. So we're ready, we're prepared. Here's a little bonus. Let's practice recovery. What? Practice recovery? We never do recovery. We're pretty sure I've debunked that myth that nobody ever does recovery, because there are people who do recovery out there. But why practice recovery? One, make sure you meet that SLA, that recovery SLA. This is something that I actually lived through. Customer recovery situation goes to run the BMC recovery and it fails. It failed because they changed the way they were doing logging, and we supported it, but they didn't apply the maintenance to our tools to actually support that logging configuration. So running this practice will make sure that your software meets your infrastructure, right? Backup strategy confirmation, other recovery options, meaning I tried to do it in 2 hours, it didn't work. What other options do I have to get it within the 2 hours? So you can practice that and get that down to the point that you need to have it. And what should I practice? Yeah, your recovery utility, your log tool, and then building those recovery jobs, right? Building those log JCLs and running them and make sure they actually do run. And then how do we practice? So this is very specific to BMC, but I know other vendors have this. We can do simulations, which actually does everything in the recovery except write out the VSAM linear data set. So it's very similar to the redirected recovery, but it's actually using the actual object in the catalog. Estimation is good as well, right? So can I estimate how long this recovery would do? So within BMC, we would do a recovery analyze only that would walk through all the steps, find all the logs that we need, and then come up with an estimate and say, hey, I have to spin through 100 logs to do this recovery. If I go this fast, it's going to take me 30 minutes to do this recovery, okay? So simulate recoveries can work not only on applications, but subsystem recovery, whether it's DR or whether it's local subsystem recovery. I always bring up these different stories where I wish they just said, let's bring the whole subsystem up prior to this problem. Well, that's pretty scary, right? You're bringing the whole subsystem up to prior to a point in time. Is that even feasible? Well, you can simulate that with the BMC tools. So you can have some familiarity with actually doing that. And then I say collect the data for use, right? That other customer I was talking about last week, that's what they want. They want to be able to, hey, get a message from their boss to say, how long would it take to recover the customer database? They want to know the answer, right? In short time, it'll take 4 hours, it'll take 5 hours. And an estimate is a good way to do that. So be prepared to do that. So practice, again, Chad, we don't practice, right? Come on. When it hits the fan, we'll be ready. We're good to go. Well, you might find some issues in your environment. So here I ran my little practice here, and it turns out I have an edit proc here, and I had an error in my edit proc. Well, that was a problem, right? Hey, here I tried to do recovery and unavailable log ranges here. Uh-oh. Well, that would have been bad. I wouldn't be able to recover that object. And then here, I'm actually building my index, and I find out that I got some duplicate indexes out there. Wow. Okay. So running might help you feel comfortable to recover, but you might find other problems out there that you can fix. So it's all goodness. My local subsystem recovery, this is using our tool. This is using a recovery manager tool where I can simulate local subsystem recovery. Here I just say, hey, I want to simulate this recovery. And it builds all the jobs. And actually, when you submit it, it's going to simulate doing those recoveries, recovering the catalog, doing all that work, spinning through the logs, that type of stuff. So
Chad, sorry, before we go
yes,
on to
go
summary,
ahead.
we got one question for you. Do you
Sure.
still recommend change accumulation tool usage?
So obviously in the IMS, if anyone was an IMS DBA in the past, right, change accum was needed to do recoveries, right? Because it actually accumulated the log, and then for each record, right, we only have that last new record for that log. With Db2, I know our log accum product actually just cuts down the amount of log that would be used to do the recovery. So I do recommend it in a couple of critical cases. So if some tables are so critical that I need to recover those separate from the rest of the objects, say of my recovery scope, I would certainly suggest using change accum. That's an additional resource that you can use that maybe isn't shared with some of the other recoveries. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, if it doesn't, someone can add something else to the chat here. And I'll take a breath here. If you guys have some more questions that you're typing away, go right ahead here. So summary, no one should be a recovery expert, right? I am nowhere near a recovery expert. When you call up BMC support because you have recovery situations, the people that are writing the recovery code are your recovery experts, right? So leverage your vendors, whether it's IBM, Broadcom, BMC, or whoever you're using for tools. However, being prepared, being ready, just like, when you have to give a presentation to your boss, isn't it great when you're prepared and you give that presentation and you feel confident? That's what we're trying to be here. We're trying to be confident in your recovery, in so much that if you can't do a recovery or, ransomware got in there, knowing what you have available is something that makes you a hero in your environment, right? So I say practice. Sometimes that's tough to do, right? We all have a lot of work to do. You actually really have to carve out some time for practice. But preparation and readiness, automate as much as you can, right? Put something in the scheduler that checks this and make sure everything's good to go. Your equipment, exercise that equipment. It does get rusty. Things change out there. You need to be able to react very quickly. Trust the resources that are available and meet the need of the businesses. So this lady's smiling. I'm sure she's prepared and ready. So any questions, Trevor? Let them loose. If not,
Okay.
that's my presentation for today.
Well, thank you very much. We haven't got any for the moment, but let's give people a minute. I was going to ask you what you thought of air gaps in terms of backups, because well, I was at a presentation last year about air gapped sort of backups, and it seems that you've got to plug it into the mainframe to get the data across, and then you air gap it, and whether that was really an air gapped situation if you spent some of the time being connected to the mainframe.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot more in this area in the near future, because yeah, it is very easy to have 3 locations with Dell or IBM hardware to take another version of your data, or take those image copies and keep them separate from the mainframe. The problem today is, how do we get them back, right? How do we get them back and fold them into a type of recovery? And it's not just the database, right? We're talking about database and DB2 here, but it's the same thing with flat files as well. So whether it's a mutable, where it's a write only, write once, read many times type of device, we still have to get that back and then plug it into what we've been living with for 35, 40 years with databases. So I think you're going to see a lot more in there. So whether it's IBM Cyber Vault and what they're doing in that arena, or some of these other hardware vendors partnering up with some software vendors to make this actually work. I think that's what you're going to see probably this year, is my guess.
Okay, that's good. Interesting. We haven't got any other questions coming in yet. If anyone does have any questions later that you think of, then just here we are. Mike Brauweiler says, just as a point of order, some industries mandate practice, e.g. financial institutions, hospitals, and some municipals. Okay, good point there. Thank you, Mike.
Very good point. Very good point. We do have customers that are utilizing not only simulation, but estimation, right? Because they do have a requirement to make sure that they can actually recover. So yeah, very good point.
Okay, thanks. Right. I will move on. Like I was just saying, you can email me. You should have received an email from me anyway, but I'm trevor@iteched.com, so you can send those to me and I'll pass them on to Chad, and I'm sure he'll get back to you fairly promptly with that. So Chad, let me thank you very much for your presentation. That was really interesting. I always like backup and recovery stuff. It sort of seems so easy, and yet it's always so hard.
This is true.
Because we're a virtual user group, can you assume that you're getting a virtual round of applause?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks for that. Let's go back to my screen. Just a couple of things just to round off the meeting. So, we've got some news. We've got some DB2 news. A company called Infotel Core has just released DB-IQ version 6.03, which they say is a solution for maintaining a cleaner DB2 catalog for improved database and application performance and availability. If you're interested in that, there's a link on our website to the press release. Moving on, we've got a couple of DB2 related articles. We've got evaluating and tuning DB2 subsystem weight suspension times. That's by Sally Meir, and that's actually in the issue 1 for 2023 of Enterprise Tech Journal. And again, there's links on our website to this. And this was by last time speaker Craig Mullins, and that's on the DB2 portal blog. escaping single quotes in DB2 SQL statements. Then we've got consistency of ZPalms in DB2 data sharing groups. That's by Emil Koch on the iDug blog site. That was from January. And also from January, we've got this one. DSNA kicks. Why use DSNA kicks? Calling DSNA kicks through REST API, a user experience. And that's by Brian Laub. And that's on the iDug blog site. So moving on, what have we got planned for the future? Well, next time, the 23rd of May, we've got Canvas Botha, and he's going to be talking about writing high-performance SQL statements. And then after that, the meeting's on the 18th of July. Put these dates in your calendar. We've got Mark Reiber, who's the DB2 for ZOS specialist at IBM Z Washington Systems Center. And his presentation is called Local Applications Can Take Advantage of System Profile Monitoring in DB2 13 for ZOS or ZOS. Moving on, just a reminder that you can keep up to date with what's happening in the world of DB2 and the virtual DB2 user group by following us on Facebook. We've got a page, Twitter, and we've got a LinkedIn group. And of course, LinkedIn doesn't do vanity URLs, so we've got a long, complicated number. Recordings of this meeting and our previous one, and of course, all future meetings will be on YouTube. That's why I've got the YouTube icon there. The link is on our resources page on our website. And if you do tweet, Insta, or any of the other social media things, then can you use hashtag virtualdb2? And then we'll know it's about this meeting. Okay, well, that's all for this meeting of the virtual DB2 user group. Can I thank you all for attending? Thanks to Planet Mainframe and IntelliMagic for sponsoring our user group. And of course, I'd particularly like to thank Chad Reiber for his presentation. So that's it. Thank you all very much for joining the meeting. And I look forward to seeing you again on the 23rd of May. So thanks all and goodbye.